Custer County Commissioners meeting will come to order. Let the record show that today is Wednesday, April 18th, 9 o'clock a.m. Mrs. Roper, would you lead us in the pledge? I'm sorry, gosh darn it.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. My apologies.
Did everybody get a program? You got to have a program. You won't know who we are
They're back on
or what we're doing.
You're not
okay.
on the fire department, and you're not on the search and rescue and all of that, right?
I'm not.
No, I apologize.
I'd love to be, but I can't.
Madam Secretary, would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Flower,
Present.
Commissioner Kanda,
Here.
Commissioner Prince,
Yeah.
Attorney Clint Smith,
Present.
and Clerk to the Board Kelly Camper present.
Thank you. Amendments to the agenda, gentlemen?
None here.
Commissioner Prince?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Nor do I.
We can discuss.
I'll defer, yeah.
Agenda.
Okay, good. Audience introductions, ma'am?
Jackie Bubas for the second.
Cindy Howard, Custer County OEM.
Brenda Gady, BOCC admin.
John Spar, Wetmore.
Bruce Barr, Wetmore.
Alden Gray, Westmore.
Shannon Sheriff.
Thank you, welcome. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for hosting us today. Appreciate that, and whoever made the coffee.
Thank you very much.
Good mud. That was a good mud pot. Mud.
Approval of minutes, March 30th, April 3rd, and April 4th. I'm assuming, gentlemen, you had an opportunity to look at those minutes.
I did. I'll move to accept them, and then we can
Okay.
discuss it.
I'll second the motion. Been moved and seconded to accept March 30, April 3rd, and April 4th minutes. Discussion. I did contact Kelly, and we kind of had a typographical change on the March 30th minutes, if you want to look at that. There was an action item. Normally she puts those in bold print, and I just happened to mention to her
On
that,
the 30th?
yeah, I'm getting there right now. If you'll scroll.
It was on the second page
Yes.
for the bills, the vouchers.
That's correct. If you look under new business, vouchers, motion by, you see that? Normally that would have been bolded because that was an action item, so I just brought that to her attention, and she informed me that she did just bold that. So the wording was fine.
Never let that happen again.
Her format is to bold the action items, and so that was the only thing that I saw on any of the three sets of minutes. Anyone else?
Nope.
Commissioner Prince, no hearing, no further discussion. We'll proceed to vote. All in favor of approving the minutes of March 30th, April 3rd, and April 4th, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Those minutes have been approved. Thank you. Attorney items.
I guess I have to justify I was giving some legal advice to the sheriff a little while ago. He asked me a question yesterday, and then he gave me the answer, which I confirmed. So, anyway, I worked on that, and I attended the Justice Center Committee meeting and the fire ban workshop. And that's about all I guess I've done. I did send a letter out at the request of Jackie Hobby inquiring of Tom Redmond, or his property manager,
Oh, good.
Concerning the hangar space. It's just an unimproved piece of land out at the airport, but what their intentions are, if they're going to keep that or if they're intending to transfer ownership as well. I haven't gotten an answer back yet.
Thank you for doing that. I kind of let that fall through the cracks. I was supposed to follow up a little on that myself and did not, so thank you. I apologize, gentlemen, I jumped right over commissioner items.
It's great we all like Clint. It's nice to have Clint be first.
Yeah, thought we could catch him sleeping or something over there. And of course, he's looking very dapper, as Sheriff Barley pointed out today. Commissioner items, I apologize, gentlemen. Commissioner Prince, would you talk about the stone house a little, where we're at with that?
Sure. The last discussion we had with Mr. Goble, we indicated to him that we were not interested in purchasing the building, and I suggested to him at the time that possibly a lease or a lease purchase option may be more palatable, since we didn't have any budget for it, and I wasn't sure we had a need for the building at all. And after further discussion with my fellow colleagues here, we decided that it was not something we wished to pursue. I wrote him a nice email thanking him for the opportunity to review it, but at the present time, the Custer County would not be interested in pursuing either a lease or a purchase of his building.
Great, thank you. Anything else, sir?
Is it my turn?
Commissioner report? Yeah.
Is that's the stone building there to the
It's on the corner.
Yeah. Live and good.
Yeah, they
Live and good.
wanted like 270,000 for that. Or
269.
Ballpark, right?
269.
279.
279.
Yeah, they thought
79.
about potentially leasing it to us with an option to purchase at some point, and we felt that with other things going on, it probably didn't make sense at this time.
It's another old building.
That's all.
Yeah, with an upstairs in it.
Sorry, I'm like speaking out of turn, but
You are.
He brought it up. You can talk about it.
As the three of us, we all attended and worked at the Custer County Health Fair, which was a terrific event, and I'm very proud of our county for doing that, being part of that. And then with a fairly contentious tourism board, hopefully we'll get some of the kinks worked out of that.
Contentious what? You're whispering that.
I'm sorry. I appreciate you pointing that out. It was kind of a contentious tourism board meeting, but I think they got the kinks worked out, and it looks like in the future we're moving forward well with that committee. We met with economic development about some ideas they have, and just discussion. And one of the things that we thought would make a lot of sense is for the county to sponsor, as it has done many times in the past, a community open house, potentially at the bowling alley community room where we've done it before, and invite economic development to come in and discuss what the broadband initiative is, how it works. I'm sure you both and I have all heard many misconceptions in terms of I can't wait to get my free broadband, and how come I can't hook up today, and it's going to cost $5,000 to put a tower on each site, and a lot of other misconceptions. So the suggestion was, and I thought it was probably a good one, that Custer County host just an open house and advertise it and ask the Economic Development Committee to discuss where it is, what it is, and how it's going to work once it's up and running. So I'd like to just throw that out on the table. That's something I feel would be worthwhile for the county. I also attended the fire mitigation discussion last week, which I thought was excellent, and I think we're moving in a very positive direction. I appreciate the sheriff for his input. And then we had I still call it the underfunded courthouse project, but I know it has a better name now, and I don't remember what it is, but we attended that meeting. And then I just dealt with a multitude of things that I deal with every month, people calling, questions and stuff like that. And that's what I've been up to since the last meeting.
Commissioner Camden.
Okay, I got several things because a lot of stuff happens, seems like. We've been busy since the last meeting. The last meeting hadn't been that long ago. The health fair that you brought up, it was great. It was fun to actually participate and help direct traffic. It was well attended, I thought. And we learn every year, I guess. So that was great. The fire discussion we had amongst us was great. I'm sorry I missed the workshop yesterday, wasn't it, or the day before? And we'll talk some more about that later. Justice Center meeting went well, and I like the fact that we're looking at the big picture. We need to look at the big picture, where we're headed. You got to have that goal, and we got to make sure we do the right thing now, because town's growing, and you want to have the center in the center of town, so we better be thinking about where it's going to be, how we're going to do things. So I like the discussion. Worked the BLM trade with JD and Kit Shy. We're looking at getting the tower, land underneath the tower on, what do we want to call the peak today, Cindy?
Whatever you want. I'm getting caught up to speed now.
I believe we agreed, Lookout
All right,
Mountain.
we'll call it Lookout Mountain. And look, got good news there. The BLM, there's a lot of BLM ground that we do have that's north of Silver Cliff, borders Silver Cliff. We got some lots there that are perfect because it's on that open range area that people are grazing up there by Ed Lyons' gravel pit. So I asked Kit to take a look at, get with JD to take a look at the number of acres. And we've got lots of acres on that Silver Cliff area. So we'll compare the two that we need for the tower with that. See what the BLMs will be willing to do. They will be coming down with their vice presidents and some other people later. Not because of that, but they're getting they're logging what they have. They're bringing their people around, their leadership around to different sites in Colorado. So they're coming down here. It's a good time to discuss it with them. We also need, I talked to Clint about it too, we need to describe the right-of-way up there, and we got to resolve how we get that right-of-way settled. 60 feet right-of-way through Silver Cliff, it hits the border there, and it's a 30-foot right-of-way that we do need to describe legally, and then figure out what kind of a resolution we're going to have as we get into that later. The other big deal that happened was the Republican convention occurred, and Tom and I were delegates there, as was Jax and anybody else in here at the time. It was a great honor, actually, to have gone through the caucus process in this county, and I'm talking for all the people, both the Democrats and the Republicans went through it. And it turns out the conventions for both were there near each other. Boulder was where the Republican convention was held, and right next to it, the Democrats. What was the name of that center? Does anybody know where they were meeting that day? I can't remember what it was. So, and that's why I'm wearing the suit and tie today more than anything. It's to respect the process. We work for you, and for you all, and that really brings it home when you go through the whole 9 yards that we just did. That was something. And so it's not because we're trying to put on a who's got the best tie show up here, but it's out of respect. You go to church, you respect God, and you wear maybe your best, or you wear something that connote that. And if the governor came to town, why would you wear something better for him, or whatever? And so what better than to respect you guys? That's why I wear the suit and tie most of the time. And it was great to do that. As a matter of fact, I'm going to pass my card out again, so you all have my phone number, because we all want to hear from you if we got something going on. And I get called all the time by a lot of people, as does Tom and as does Jay. Jay just mentioned that. So we got to get out. It energized me to get out and meet more people. I'm going to, as a matter of fact, it pointed out the fact we got to come together. I'm going to meet with the Democratic convention, or what do you call it? It's Roland Williams, and have a meeting with him. To see if I can nail him down and say, look, let's have a talk. So that was interesting. The other thing that came up this week was the International Space Symposium in the Springs. I attended that on my own dime and time, and for a couple reasons. One is to keep current in what's new. I met the vice president. He was there in the Springs. Didn't personally meet him. I met with the group that was with him in person. That was really cool, and was able to listen to what he's got in mind. And I'll tell you a couple things. The vice president is in charge of the National Strategic Space Program. That's his job. It's been dormant for 25 years because we kind of ebbed down off of the shuttle and the missions and all the glory and remember the goal we had to go to the moon and everybody got behind it. From Sputnik to the time we were on the moon was 10 years. We can't get an airplane program off the ground in 10 years anymore because of layers of bureaucracy, those kinds of things, and the government recognized that. And Trump, as you've heard, is working his best to get rid of a lot of regulations. And so they've energized the space program, and it is going to, we're going back to the moon soon. They're going to build a station there. They're going to have an orbiting gateway, they call it, to bring supplies into, and they'll bring little rockets up off the moon. I don't know what it's going to be, who knows, to get the supplies and keep it going. And they're going to use that as a gateway to get to Mars. Well, there's more to it than that. Not only was was the vice president talking about strategy and new ways to go, but it's more than just that goal. There's military reasons why they're doing it, and there's commercial reasons. One of the guys they had there was the Commerce Secretary, Wilbur Ross. Talked about deregulation, licensing, and this is important for us because of broadband, which has perked my ears up. They're putting lots of money into it. They're trying to reduce the bureaucracy. And I'll give you an example. They pointed out the president of Lockheed, or the CEO of Lockheed and the CEO of Boeing were there, and they said, let's compare what it takes to contract with the government with against the commercial side. It takes 6 years from getting a program on contract to where they build something, test it, and then get it out the door for a government program. Commercial-wise, it takes 2. Well, beyond that, there are these other companies. Private industry is out there, and there's a new company. You've heard of Elon Musk and his stuff. I mentioned that the other day. Well, there's another one called Planet. They pump out a satellite a week, believe it or not. And these are small satellites, but it's because it's a sort of like Walmart stocks shelves just in time. Well, they're stocking satellites on orbit. And the reason that matters is you get in low Earth orbit, you need a lot more satellites, and I mentioned that before, and that's what they're going to do for the broadband improvements over the next X years, because the geosynchronous orbits are crowded, and there's a lot of debris and a lot of danger putting satellites up there and those kinds of things. So the good news is there's a lot of money they're pouring into it. They are serious about moving ahead at all parts of the government, which I mentioned, the Commerce. And so why do I care? I care because we have a broadband program going here, and we want to make sure that we use your dollars and the taxpayer dollars wisely to get that on the docket and move out. So I had a quick conversation with Charles and the economic guys, just real quick. They're going to be here at the end of the month, right? The next meeting they're coming. I think they're on the agenda. And they want to bring us up to speed. And I like the idea, Jay, of having a workshop to get rid of all get questions on the table. And so Charles did bring up we still have one more grant to get. We can't spend any money yet. We can't move forward yet until we get the federal grant. And he said there was a little snafu getting that on sooner than later. There's some administrative thing. So it doesn't look like we're going to get started on that until, he said, maybe the end of June, but we'll know more at the end of, when he talks to us this month, whether where that grant stands. So we worry about that, and we'll have to time things so that we get things done, and that got me concerned, and that's why we need to talk to him about getting things ready, to get right-of-ways ready and get the rumors down and all that, and how we're going to handle moving forward in conjunction with the technology that's evolving as well. So we can keep our eyes on that. So I thought that was a very worthwhile thing to go to, and very, very interesting. The other thing that's happened, we got a 911 meeting tomorrow, I think, with Buck. Not 911, but I think with Buck and...
That's the next week. Buck and Samantha, E911?
No, I thought it was this Thursday. And I'll double check the schedule.
I've got it written down tomorrow.
It's tomorrow, I believe. Yeah. Samantha Moose sent out a meeting notice, so I'm planning on being there for that. Landfill we're gonna meet after this still on the plan, right, Tom?
Yep, 2 o'clock.
We're gonna go and talk with Rusty and the guys at the landfill. I will take my tie off for that. And and go out there and we're gonna walk around the landfill and make sure he understands what our vision is for the different parcels of land we still have up there that will make us last through the next, looks like 75 years or so, according to Rusty. We'll have to talk to him about it.
And I believe we're meeting with the engineering company, Golder.
Golder is the name of the outfit we'll see what it costs to do that study. So that's brings us up to speed from my point of view for now.
Good. I would, well, let me give you my daily report first, and then we'll go back to another item. Since our last board meeting, as these gentlemen have mentioned, I did go and help set up for health fair on Friday, April 6th, and then volunteered for the health fair itself on April the 7th. Had my blood drawn. I shouldn't have, because now I'm in trouble at home. Apparently my
what you get.
cholesterol's not what it's supposed to be.
You get for being married to a nurse.
April 13th and 14th, or sorry, April 12th, I attended the Custer County Conservation District workshop. It was up at Tony's Pizza. They had a good meeting and was informative. April 13th and 14th, I also attended the State Republican Assembly in Denver. April the 16th, the fire ban workshop that we had in the Commissioner's boardroom. And then also that afternoon we had, and I attended the Justice Center Committee meeting. And on April 17th, yesterday, I attended the Sangre de Cristo Wilderness Operations meeting at Wet Mountain Firehouse. Shannon and Cindy Howard were both there. Shannon Byerly and Cindy Howard spoke, and it was, again, an informative meeting to set in on and kind of see where all the federal wilderness plans are going and or not going, as the case may be. But certainly there was a lot of discussion about South Colony and its extremely heavily used. Water quality is an issue down there, as well as
Because of the traffic.
yeah, they're just, I forgot the numbers, like 1,200 or more than that, maybe people a season, 12,000, yeah.
A year, you had
Yeah.
over 12,000
Yeah.
users in the South
Like 1,200 a
Alone,
day.
just
Yeah,
South
that's what
Colony.
it was. So South Colony's just getting hammered, and they're about to give up on trying to maintain the wilderness character of that particular drainage, because it's just getting
Well, they're gonna have to
bombarded.
start doing water quality testing now, because there's so much human waste in those
Yeah, right.
drainages. There's no facilities in there, no restrooms.
Right.
I spoke with a couple people. Interestingly enough, people have said, "Hey, you guys gotta close that road down there. You gotta do something to slow that traffic down, particularly in the winter, because of all the search and rescue efforts that have been conducted
On South Colony.
when people go in there that really aren't prepared."
That's true.
And they said, "We cannot do that. That is not federal jurisdiction. That is county jurisdiction." So it's kind of interesting. So anyway, good meeting there. And then the other thing I wanted to share with you was a conversation I had yesterday. I can pull his name up. Sorry, I should have had his card out. There was a gentleman come in the commissioner's room yesterday that wanted to visit about the possibility of Custer County leasing to AT&T a spot for a tower. His name was Evan Brooks with Site Services Corporation out of Denver. It's a company that hires themselves out to locate and
They work for
facilitate.
AT&T.
To facilitate getting these towers put around. So he came yesterday. His company was hired by AT&T and they are looking to lease some tower space from the county for a 100-foot tower on basically a 20 by 30 footprint, 20 by 30 footprint. And it's actually a FirstNet tower is the general idea with that. They'll obviously have cell phone communications on that as well. So I told him that I would speak to you gentlemen today about that. He is going to email me a draft proposal if we're interested in looking at a future commissioners meeting, then we can do that.
Did he care where it was? Why
Yes.
can't he use one of these
Yeah,
six towers?
very specifically, and you probably know from your work with the town of Westcliff.
Right, and it's
Got to be
right
near
where
West
it's
Cliff
in
or
the
something.
middle of our potential area for the new Justice Center.
Oh, really? They want to put it in town?
Well, and actually,
There
we
needs to be some more discussion.
we did look at a map. He showed me the proposed target area for AT&T, and it actually did not quite go that far east, but nonetheless, AT&T's intent is to try to find a spot close to the courthouse somewhere. There's a 4 or 5 block radius there that he's been tasked to try to locate a place to put up a tower. So I said I would bring it forward to you guys today. We can have some further discussion today. I'm fine with that, but I told him we would not be deciding anything other than do we want to move forward with a discussion with
Well,
him.
listen,
Yes, go
Can I
ahead.
just recommend that
Sure.
we ask him to make a proposal and then we have something to actually discuss?
yeah, we got to
Right,
understand.
and that's
what we got.
exactly what I instructed him yesterday, to submit some draft proposal for us so we knew what we were talking about.
Right.
He said he would do that and send that to me.
He needs some whys
And
they
then-
needed there in that proposal.
Pardon?
I would assume he would give us the whys they needed in that particular
Yes.
place.
Yeah. And then he said he would be more than willing to come back down from Denver to meet with us if we wanted to pursue a conversation with him. Mr. Byers, you had a comment?
A couple questions / comments, I guess, for you. Did he mention, so this new tower, is that going to work in conjunction with the current tower that they have, so that it's because, so I'm very skeptical of the FirstNet system that the state's going to force down all of our throats. They've already signed what is a $14 billion contract with AT&T, who already provides terrible customer service throughout the state. So now we're being forced to use AT&T for this new proposed FirstNet system, which if you're not familiar with FirstNet, it's supposed to be for first responders to get bandwidth away from the cell towers that are commercially used by citizens and generally, and it's so that first responders will be on a different bandwidth, so that in the case of emergencies, as we've experienced now across the nation, when there's a critical incident or emergency, everybody gets onto their phones and all that, and now first responders can't use that bandwidth because it's flooded, and so then it cuts all emergency communications down. That's the whole point of FirstNet. Well, the promise is that when FirstNet came, it would drastically increase coverage across the entire state. And initially we were promised that all of the rural areas would be the first ones to get it. They would require the contractors to put it in the rural areas first, right? Because that's not where you make money. You make money in the metro areas and in the higher populous areas. So they were going to force the contractors to do it in the rural areas first. Then that would help expedite the rural areas getting it, so that because they would be anxious to get that done and get to the metro areas where then they would make all their money. Well, now, of course, that isn't going to happen. It's going to go to the metro areas first. We will get it far later, but my concern is we have one tower in the county right now which provides inadequate service. And I'm sorry, when I say that's not completely accurate. There's another tower that serves this part of Wetmore that's not actually in Wetmore, but everyone in Wetmore knows how terrible our service is down here as well for AT&T. Jump in here, correct me at any time you want to. But we know how bad the service is here. And so my only question is when they start to say, well, we want to put a tower there. Well, wait a second, how are we going to serve the southern end of the county? How are we going to serve the northern end of the county, the eastern end of the county? One tower isn't going to cut it in our county to adequately serve the citizens and the first responders. And so
Did they say they
that's
can't
food for thought.
co-locate
I
them?
just want you to, I don't know how knowledgeable you are about FirstNet yet, and I would be lying if I told you that I knew all the ins and outs, but I've been highly skeptical from, and especially once we were promised the rural areas were going to get it, and now they've walked backwards on that. So we're going to get the same thing that happened with our digital trunking systems. Everything is the metro areas. They have great service, and then they throw up one tower that kind of gets us here and there, and then you're on your own with everything else. And that's what's going to happen with FirstNet.
I'm hearing that Warfano County thinks they're going to put a site on Deer Peak to cover the south end and Warfano County. To add to what Shannon said, they're going to build this other band for first responders, but AT&T gets to sell that to the public, but then kick the public off during an emergency. So the grant funds are going to fund the infrastructure. But the part that they're not telling you is you're going to have to buy everybody the phones and pay the service, and it's going to be more pricey than what your county phones are now. And so while we can't even afford really to
Well, hope this guy
continue
has
to
enough
support our
information
BTR.
to answer questions, because this is just bringing up a lot of questions, like why can't they co-locate them, or maybe they can, or
Right,
not.
and that's
And
why
why
I
do they
don't
need
know.
it in town, and why not out on Deer Peak or whatever? So we
I
need
would
to
just
get somebody
highly
to know.
encourage you to maybe read up, and it's everywhere. You just have a look, just so you have a general idea, because I think those are some questions we need to know from AT&T, because
All right. Yeah, the other thing, if I can finish my report, then was after he indicated to me that as he was leaving the commissioner's boardroom, he was headed to look at Deer Peak because they're also considering putting a tower up there as well.
it's pretty funny. He was here to talk to you about cell service, and we didn't have a cell service yesterday.
It's a good thing he was not at AT&T. You know, that's,
He mentioned that.
That was-
Because he didn't
Oh,
have
did
it on
he?
his
Yeah, he didn't have it
phone.
either. But he was not from AT&T. That's
AT&T.
That's the other thing, so. But I think that concludes my report, so, yes, ma'am.
Can I ask a quick question? The Justice Center Committee meeting, is that the same as underfunded?
Yes.
I know we have like a
Yeah.
bazillion, like, and then that's also the same as the building something or other,
County needs
Assessment.
the
assessment.
needs
Yes.
assessment.
Yeah, we'll
Okay,
talk
so-
about that when we get to that
Okay.
agenda, and probably clear that
Thank
up.
you.
Yeah, no problem.
I need to get the name correct.
All right, I
When we
just.
started, it was called
If I have it
underfunded.
in my head what they all are,
Yeah.
that'd be good, thanks.
Yeah, we'll discuss that. Administrative assistant items?
I don't have anything at this time.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
With an element of surprise, he says.
Okay, yeah, we'll probably do
No.
anything.
It's-
I don't know why we have staff report on there necessarily
I
today.
think it's just a placeholder,
Yeah.
just in case, because
Good. Thank you.
Jackie did her staff report her last week.
Our agenda does not have any old business, gentlemen, anything?
I have two items.
All right, sir, go ahead.
One is Mr. Spar this morning gave me a list of some additional items that need to be
Okay.
fixed.
Sorry, could you tell us what those two items are before you go into detail on?
Happy to.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Spar mentioned that, I'm going to talk about the men's restroom in a
Okay.
second, but the other items were that the handicap door in the basement restroom is too hard to open. If you're in a wheelchair and you try and get in there, you can't do it, okay? That's
So-
not going to fly. The coffee room door glass is about to fall out, and we'd like a copy of the as-is buildings.
As built,
As built.
As built,
Yeah.
that's what I meant. I sent an
that was
email.
promised to us,
Yep.
have never gotten.
I sent an email to him this morning. I'll read his response.
And then your other items, sir? I'm just trying to get the two items so we can approve
Well,
it.
they're
to
two
go on with
different-
old
they're two
business.
different things.
Yeah, so can you just tell us what the second one is?
Well, the second one is the ongoing issue with the men's urinal.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm confused. Technically, if we add anything to old business, we really need to vote on that?
I was giving an
so-
update on old business.
Yeah, so I thought you said you had two items of old business.
I do, and they're
Okay.
both with
One-
this building.
oh, they're both-
But it's just info,
Okay.
is that right?
Two
all right,
separate-
so
two-
just-
I have them as two separate items because one is new today and one is the ongoing old business
Okay.
of the restroom.
So update on issues with the community building, is that correct?
Right. At
Okay.
any rate, the stuff you gave me this morning, Mr. Spar, Justin said that he'll get to work on them right away. The three things we mentioned.
According to them, they asked us to have it in before the end of the month, because that's when it cuts off. If they're not aware of that before the end of the month, they won't touch it.
Okay, well, once they're notified, they're going to fix it whenever. The second thing is on the ongoing men's urinal issue. I sent them a nasty gram, and it's been 2 weeks since I sent them my last response, my last letter to them. They never responded, so I wrote to them on April 4th. I sent an email regarding the replacement of defective urinal in the men's restroom in the community center. As of this date, you have failed to respond. Please be advised that this issue is not resolved by the end of April, and I'll ask the county attorney to take such action as necessary to resolve this. Within moments, he wrote back to me, apologized, and said they're getting Flow Right down here, which is the company that did the
Plumbing?
plumbing, yeah, and they will address it. So, without me going up there and grabbing him and saying, get your butt down here, I've done what I can, but we're working on it. So those are the two issues down here that I have. That's old business, continuing maintenance type things.
And you made them aware of it prior to our warranties ending at the end of April, so they're,
Right,
we should be
it's all
covered
under
there.
warranty.
Yeah, okay. And I'm sorry, Commissioner Prince, I didn't mean to keep interrupting. I get a little nervous about old business. Counselor, I would ask you, are we okay with adding old business during our meeting without a 24-hour notice? That's where my angst lies.
Yeah, if it's old business, I mean, generally, it's always just been brought up without any further
Yeah.
elaboration on the agenda itself. If it's something that's been discussed before.
And I did a little research. Old business is not an accurate term to be on this agenda. It should be unfinished business. There is no such thing, according to Robert's Rules of Parliamentary Procedure, as old business. So we may make that change and start calling that unfinished business, because technically anything that is
Old
addressed
business is
under
completed.
under unfinished business would be just that, business that we were, and according to the rules, which we're bound to try to operate by, Robert's Rules states that for an item to be listed under unfinished business, it would be an item of business that we were in the middle of discussing when the meeting at which we were discussing that ends abruptly, either for an adjournment or a fire or whatever it was. Historically, unfinished business has been misused, and old business really doesn't even belong on an agenda. So I don't know. When you're bored, Counselor, if you want to bone up on that a little, I don't know if it's that critical that we need to change it, but it's certainly not correct. So I don't know. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, sir. You were finished. Again, I apologize for interrupting you. I just was a little nervous. Commissioner Kanda, with that being said, any old business? No. Nor do I. Moving on to new business. First item on the agenda is updated Deer Peak and Vertimont Tower intergovernmental agreement. We have copies of that, at least I'm assuming.
we got it.
We all do. We did send that to, well, let me rephrase that. The school, Terry Davis on behalf of the school district, has signed that agreement. I would defer to our administrative assistant, Mrs. Gady. Comments?
I spoke to Terry Munson, who's the fire protection district admin, and I talked to her yesterday, and she said she was going to talk to Roger Camper, and she thought that they didn't have any issues with it. If they did have any issues with it, she would let me know via email, and I did not receive an email from her, so I'm assuming that they're okay with it. So
Okay.
the other party, one of the other parties is the hospital district, and of course Delwyn is gone, and Teresa Kennedy, who's their admin, was saying, wanting all the paperwork and all the grants, and so I spent about a day researching and finding everything I could, and I emailed her probably way more information than she ever wanted to know, but she said that they're forwarding it to their legal team. And if I had to guess, I would say that they're going to fight trying to have to pay their portion.
Okay. Number one, thank you for that work. I was witness to you doing part of that. Certainly used up some of your time, and I'm going to say probably rightfully so. They now have a new administrator on board. Delwyn Lester has left that position, so I'm sure they're wanting to get as much information as they can to try to bring their new medical director up to speed.
They've already hired one?
Yes.
Do you have a name?
I've read it. I cannot repeat. I don't.
Local guy?
remember. No, it was a lady from Canyon City. Right now, she's scheduled to come 1 or 2 days a month.
No, Cindy has more that she'd like to say regarding the hospital.
So, Janie Candelera?
Candelaria, yeah.
She's coming to the E911 meeting tomorrow,
Yes.
and I was wrong on that date, so. thank you for
You're
correcting
going to be
that.
there then.
Yeah,
huh?
now I will be.
Good.
Donna Hobby had 2 questions, and I think she talked to one of you about. One question was, is it going to be retroactive, and how are we going to do the billing? It was going to be quarterly or monthly. I think she was recommending quarterly. That's not in the IGA, but my recommendation would be retroactive and make them quarterly billings. Her other question was it also going to cover the lease, the payment to SBA on the Deer
That
site?
I pay
and
every month?
that Shannon pays, and that was never up for discussion. It's
Right.
not all included as well. That, I think, would get more pushback from the hospital district and folks that aren't using the VHF aspect. And I think, with some of the long-term costs of DTR, we really need to look at developing our VHFs and having a good plan B. So those aren't included, and I don't,
Those are things that could be discussed or made after we come to an agreement to come together, I would think. That's business. How do you
Well,
operate?
Well, it's not in the
Yeah, it's not in the
IGA as
IGA
written,
now,
as
so
presented.
Well, that's what I
we
mean.
turn around and write another IGA in
Yeah.
60 days.
So one of the things that you can do, and I can't say most because I haven't gone out and done a poll, but I imagine it is most, and that is that get rid of some of these IGAs on towers and all that, because towers are part of a communication cost. It's just a real cost that comes with providing dispatch services to agencies. So you get rid of all those and you say, listen, so this is what it's going to cost you every year to use dispatch services.
It'll be an IGA.
You either pay it or you don't get dispatched to things. You don't give them a choice because those are real costs. You don't get to pick and choose what you are and aren't going to participate in, because and most municipalities or county agencies that are paying for their own communication centers. I can use Canyon City, Fremont County, Florence, all of that. They have a regional communication center, which essentially so do we, because it's the entire county, just like Fremont County's is. Every entity that gets dispatch, or comma, if citizens are calling that communication center to get information to one of those agencies, they pay.
What's communication?
And it's all broken down. They just break it down. A fire receives this many dispatch calls, it's this percentage, that's your fee. End of discussion. If it costs us $100,000 a year to run a dispatch center and you use 13% of the calls, you pay $13,000. And then you get rid of this whole, well, we don't agree with that and we don't want to pay for that tower.
That's a good
fine.
plan.
You won't get dispatched to calls anymore. And you're going to have to man your own phone system now and 911 calls for emergency services.
So do we,
Come
Shannon,
there.
do we know what that would be? Are we going to have to meet with people
Oh, no,
first
we
and
would-
come up
it's
with a
gonna-
plan?
we
Where
would
that's
take
going
a
to take more
concerted-
Yeah.
than
We'd have to
this.
go back.
Yeah.
Start over.
And-
maybe.
Start over.
And
Yep.
folks like Public Health and Road and Bridge and the school use the system, but they don't go through the dispatch center, but I would agree that they would still have a cost share. like-
Well, yeah, that was gonna be my
Well, that's the
question. Let's
point,
say
it's
they don't go
communication.
through the dispatch center,
But-
but they're using that equipment.
Sure.
Then, to me, that's a cost share cost.
Everybody
Now,
has to pay their part.
if we send this IGA, and we're being a little, we're making some suppositions here, which may not be fair to the clinic, but they certainly have historically been the ones that have said, no, we're not interested in signing that agreement. If that's the case, then from my standpoint, it would be, well, then you're not going to use this equipment. End of statement. Now,
That's why
do
we
they have
dropped
their
it.
own equipment on any of our towers? I don't think they do, but I'm asking because I don't really know.
I can't imagine what it would be.
They have, it's different, it's not licensed the same way VHF is through the FCC, but they have to have their own licensing to use.
Talk to the,
But if
Yeah,
they put equipment on our tower,
Well, they're
to
using
me-
They're using-
VHF for the school buses.
school buses are,
DTR. It's,
Are they using DTR?
yeah, they're using
Well, then there
DTR.
you
They
go.
got, so Homeland Security bought all the radios, and it's kind of like we were talking with FirstNet. You buy the equipment to build capability, but then sustaining. So all they're doing right now is sustaining their own mobiles and portables, but they're using towers everywhere else. And that's going to be their argument is, and that'll probably come up tomorrow, is that E911 should pay these funds, but E911 funds should not be.
well, sounds like we need a meeting
Public
before we
health.
sign any
See, the
agreements.
problem has been is for years, is the county has been able to afford to basically foot the bill for everyone. Well, we're getting to a point where the needs far exceed the means. And it's gonna be, look, it's not gonna be popular. But
Let's
is
talk
it
about
the
Well-
right thing to do for the county?
yeah, I mean, what's not right about it? I get it, that won't be unpopular, but I guess I ask, what's not right about asking everybody to pay their fair share? If they've got equipment on the tower, or they're pinging off of our towers, or
Using our
if
services?
they're using our services, then I don't know, if you choose not to sign an IGA, then guess what? Now, if they have their own VHFs, they can go radio to radio, correct? Like the bus.
Still got a tower.
You gotta have a tower, you gotta have a repeater site. Unless you're line of sight direct, like a family band radio, you've either gotta be line of sight or you've gotta hit a repeater. And so this is sharing that cost to hit the towers and the repeaters. Whether it's an IGA or a straight out E911 starts billing folks for the service, there's a couple ways to handle it.
Obviously.
And it might be good to talk about it tomorrow at that meeting if you can
I
sneak
think
it on
what
the
you guys are
agenda.
bringing up makes tremendously good sense, and I think the discussion here is excellent. I think we need to get a meeting with all the organizations, sit down and just lay it out.
Especially
with
with the
that.
taxing entities.
And we can find out what like
Very good
AMR is
point.
doing, if they're paying fee, and what some other agencies are doing, because I don't know
Very
that.
good point.
I don't have that
No,
background.
I've been verbally told, I won't mention it, but like Fire Protection District, that they would be willing to start footing some of that cost, recognizing that they use the
They use it
services.
a lot.
I like your allocation idea on percentages, that type of thing.
Yeah, that's
It's
the
always
reasonable way to
reasonable.
go.
Well, yeah,
All
the
of
only
them log,
problem
do we
is
know
if they
how to
don't
track it?
go through dispatch, then how do you track that?
But they do.
So I mean, do we log
Well,
every?
Everybody,
Well, like the
I mean,
school,
For calls and stuff. it's
is
not-
it fair for them
Yeah,
to
but-
pay a fifth? Do they use it as much as everyone else?
see, that's the thing, if they don't,
Needs to be
if they
prorated.
don't go through the dispatch, then how do you
they're the ones that are
prorate
cash.
them?
And I think that's
Flat
part of
fee
that
and then
discussion.
more
That's what
based
I'm-
on use or something. I don't know, it's a concept.
As long as we can log the use.
If we get pushback on the IGA, it's definitely an alternative to go, and it's,
Enforcement to be
Well, I don't think we need to pursue the IGA until we get the meeting together and figure out what we are gonna sign up to.
well, I think at the CES meeting when we discussed it last month, the consensus was to move forward, have me update the IGA.
Yeah, but we didn't have this discussion then.
No,
So-
and I think there was pushback even then
That's the
from
point,
the
so
medical.
no point trying to ramrod an IGA through and then have to figure out how we're gonna bill everybody.
Well, and I suspect tomorrow, the general feeling's gonna be have E911 pay for it. What the heck? Let's have 911 do it. No, that's not the point. That's not the purpose. E911's taking care of E911. They're not taking care of school bus communications.
The name on the
The
state
EMS.
statute is emergency
Fire.
telephone services, so, you know, there's probably some wiggle room, but not when you're talking road and bridge and public health and school buses, that's not
When you have your own, I
911.
think Jackie said, but when you have your own taxing district and those revenues are coming in, then
They gotta use them.
there's some level of expectation you pay your way. Now, it'd
That's
be
right.
different if we were talking EMS was a 501c3 or they were a county entity already.
Library.
But they're not. The library, that'd be different, but these
Well,
taxing
library's a
districts.
tax, not this one. That one's up there as a tax district, but down here.
We understand.
Wetmore Fire is not part of the
Yeah, exactly.
IGA.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
They're not a district.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
yeah, so obviously, the reason this was on the agenda today is so we can have this discussion. I think probably we need to
You want
have
to
this
table
discussion
it?
again tomorrow
Another
at the
discussion?
E911 meeting, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at least, if nothing else, I would think, your point was well taken, that we put, if it doesn't happen at a CES meeting, which I don't think I'm gonna be able to attend the next one, but get all the parties involved and sit down and peel the flesh off of it and say, okay, if you wanna use it, or do you feel like you're entitled to use it if you're not gonna pay for it? Let's have that discussion, for crying out loud. It doesn't make any sense to me, but.
Yeah.
So we will, I'll bring this up tomorrow, or you can at E911.
So we want to do it the agenda item, table it?
No, it's for discussion, so.
It's just for discussion only?
Yeah,
And I apologize, but I have a doctor's
yeah,
appointment.
that's
I
fine.
have to make, so I'm
Thank
gonna
you,
sneak out.
appreciate you coming down. So, approval if the board so desires. I don't gather that that's the desire, so we will move on to our next item of new business. The Judicial Center land acquisition discussion. Obviously, there's a committee in place to look at the potential or the possibilities of the county looking at building a new judicial center for Custer County. We've had 2 county needs assessment studies done with the intent that once they were done, then the county would look at moving forward and seeing if that's what we needed to do. Commissioners felt like there was enough need to set up a committee and have them do some further investigation, and they've been meeting and working. It is a cross-representation of the community. I can't quote you the exact number on that committee. I think there's probably 12, 14 maybe, with
Might even be more
the
than
3 commissioners
17 or something.
sometimes set in on that. We're not really members of that committee, but we do set in on that so we can hear what they have to say. So the committee has gotten to the point where they want to give the commissioners a proposal to consider for acquiring the land to put said judicial center on, if that's the route we decide to go. So I told that committee that we would talk about that a little bit here today, and they want to give us their proposal. Legal counsel has advised us that if we're going to talk about any specific contractual items, that needs to be done in executive session. So I'm recommending that we move this item of business. We can certainly have some further discussion on it, but I think we need to move it to an executive session at a subsequent meeting. Are you in agreement with that, sir?
Yes.
I'm not trying to put the kibosh on any discussion. We can certainly have that, because that's also why it's on here. But I think that's where probably we need to go. So,
So what can we talk about? What do you want?
yes.
Would it be fair
I'll
to
answer
say,
the question.
would it be fair to say though, because I hate to call this the judicial center land acquisition, because in reality, we're looking at acquiring this land for county facility expansion not only to the judicial,
Governmental.
not only to
building.
a possible judicial center, but for other county services, because as was identified in those needs assessment, across the board,
Yeah,
all
acquisition
county
of county
services,
service.
we don't have enough room, period. From the clerk's office to the treasurer's office, all of us are out
Health
of room.
and welfare
with
services.
And so I hate to label this judicial center land only because we don't know that we're going to do a judicial center, or we're going to get approval, or that the voters would even want that. So I hate to label that because I don't want to poison the well.
Right.
This is an overall county
Land
acquisition because we need.
More space for
Right.
county services, county business.
Would that be fair?
Yeah, I think it is fair. I think that whole committee is struggling with, number one, what name to put on something so that we don't appear to the community like something's already been decided. And if they don't put enough information in a title of something, then everybody goes, what's this about?
Right.
I think they've struggled a little with that. I think it's obvious that some of this needs to be kind of done in a controlled environment as an executive session so that we don't lose some kind of a position of leverage, thank you, when it does come time to purchase land. Yes, sir.
Are we talking about an addition to the courthouse, basically what you're saying?
No, those needs assessments, the two that have been done, have basically said, if you want the most bang for your buck, you can't keep adding on, scabbing on to that original courthouse. There's too many issues with that courthouse. Electrical, fire, plumbing, ADA, it just goes on and on and
Not
on.
enough
And then the
room.
facilities themselves, it's crumbling. So they said, certainly you can do that, but we would not recommend you keep adding on to that facility. So
You're talking about abandoning the courthouse?
no, not necessarily abandoning it, but moving some of that business out of there, not emptying that courthouse, but getting it to a little more manageable state where there's not quite as many offices in it, probably no offices upstairs because it's not ADA compliant upstairs or downstairs. So I think the general consensus was to try to use the main floor, maintain the courthouse, that historical aspect of it, and then probably build, but we're not going to decide that. The commissioners are not going to make that. I mean, we probably will have the final say so, but we certainly have to take that to the voters and to the citizens to see what they think. But and that's the other thing, you know, it's which comes first, the chicken or the egg? What do we do this or do we do that? Somehow, I think the commissioners do feel we need to get off center and do something, because this has been a problem for a long time, and we're lucky to be functioning in that courthouse now and not being shut down by ADA. I was trying to think if that would be OSHA, but it wouldn't be. But we're just lucky that we're not already. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, let me say on that same light, maybe a good way for the public, you all, our bosses, to understand what we're doing. The courthouse issue, the underfunded thing, sort of brought this to light on how we could improve things, and then that led to the fact that, well, we're just spending good money after bad, maybe. So what we really are doing is trying to get a judicial strategic plan for a justice center, if you want to call it that, jail, courthouse, that kind of thing. The other piece is, it's beyond that. As we got into it more, there's businesses that we must conduct, like the social services, veterans affairs, the appraiser, all those offices we're growing. The county is growing, and we've outgrown our space. So we need a strategic plan for governmental business for the county for the future, which includes the Justice Center. It includes moving people around, and it includes keeping our heritage. You know, we don't want to doze the building down. That's a piece of our heritage. That bench and everything means something. So all that's included, and so we've got a good start. Shannon's running the what do you call your committee now? The Judicial Center.
Justice.
Justice Center, which is just a piece of it. And so what Tom's talking about now is this great opportunity, perhaps, to acquire the land for the strategic business plan, acquisitions for tomorrow. And like, I don't know if Jay said it or you did, but and you brought up the leverage. We need to be able to leverage what we've got now and not miss an opportunity if we can. And so I think it does have to be talked about in the executive session at some point. But you all need to know that's what we're trying to do. The specifics of what contract to be with who, to how much, that'll all come to light when we get more information.
Go ahead, sir. You had a comment?
I was just going to say that timing is very good to do this, and it's just a comment for the public. Many counties are either in the process or just completed new justice centers, and there is money available to help fund this. So our timing, aside from being out of space and the conditions, if you've ever been to our jail and sheriff's office, you know that something has to get done. I just want to comment that timing is very, very good right now to move forward with that. The climate in Colorado in general is good. So I just was commenting that
that's a good point.
There's many, many reasons we need to move forward with this. And the county definitely, this is a definite need, not a want.
Yeah, there are grants out there.
Right, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, certainly DOLA is one that historically has helped fund the acquisition of land through grants, and I know, as sitting in on this committee, as we all did, that there was some angst with that committee about what to do first. Do we hire an engineer and an architect to draw a great big design when we have no idea how much land or how much space we're going to have to put that? Or should they move towards trying to acquire some land so that now we know this is what we've got, now what can we put on it, what can we afford, what can the voters support? So they were struggling a little about which to do first, and I think, personally, I believe that in order for us to really move forward, if we had a direction about land, we got to know that before we can do much more. It's going to be a moot point.
It will have a significant impact on cost to build too, depending on where it's at because of grade.
Right.
Are we building on a pretty level area, or are we going to have a lot of excavation costs, and then we're excavating? We're in the mountains, so how much rock are you going to hit?
Oh yeah, flood zones. Is it out of town, in town? How far out of town? Northeast, west, south. There's just a lot of consideration.
The county owns a lot of land. It's just not necessarily feasible for county services.
Good for cows.
Yeah, we got
and towers.
Got some tracts of land in Rosita that would be big enough to put a justice center on or a county services center on, but it's probably not going to work out in Rosita. So anyway, I think these are the kind of the beginning stages of this. That committee is excited to try to move forward and make something happen. But at the same time, there are going to be times when we have to deal with things in executive session, and that's not to hide from the public. That is to protect the county in their position, is the way I look at it. So, but certainly, I think that committee meets the 26th, so I'm assuming that they would probably want to come before the board either the 30th, the 1st, or the 2nd. So I would ask, gentlemen, if you have a preference for an executive session on one of those days, we could tentatively schedule that.
I don't have a preference.
No, me either, Tom.
Planning and zoning meets in the courtroom at 1:30 on the 1st, so we need to avoid that if we can. And then we have another meeting at 3 o'clock on the 1st, so I would recommend either the 30th or the 2nd. And I guess I've got a meeting at 4 o'clock on the 2nd. Probably could do both of those, but would you be okay with April the 30th for an executive session after our meeting?
Seems like, what else we got there?
Nothing. I got a fair board meeting later, but that's much later. So I would move we schedule an executive session for April the 30th
I'll second.
at, I'm going to say 2 o'clock, and then we can have discussion. Just a second.
Yeah.
Been moved and seconded to schedule executive session on Monday, April 30th at 2 p.m. Discussion about that. Commissioner Prince, you okay with 2 o'clock? I'm thinking that would give us a lunch break prior to the executive session. Yes, ma'am.
Generally, you record before and after. So, an executive session, you record all the silliness going in, and then come out of it and say, we didn't
Right.
do anything, or we did do something, or we made these decisions. So will you do that?
Absolutely. Yeah, my intent and the way I understand it is we will listen to their proposal and that will be it. We're not going to make any decisions
No, there
made,
won't be any
obviously,
decisions.
so.
But there'll be the public portion of it before we go into executive session. And once we come out, that has to be recorded. And the nature of this discussion is also something that is recorded in executive session.
Go ahead.
So Ms. Bubis asked if I have minutes, or if we have minutes from the committee's meeting, which we do, have minutes. Can I give those to Ms. Bubis if she requests those? I don't believe that the minutes include anything that would.
I think I took out all the details of who,
There
what,
was some
where,
documentation
why,
that
how.
was provided at the meeting, and that's confidential at this point.
Okay.
But if the minutes are just general in terms.
Just go over the minutes and make sure.
And make sure that the.
Give anything away.
Okay.
Well,
Give
it does
away
seem
It's
to
only,
be
it's
confidential.
only because.
That's fine,
Yeah.
I'm not arguing, it was just a question.
Right. No,
No,
we have
we're
been
not
recording it.
trying to hide anything, Jackie, other than, if there's a deal in
Well,
place.
strategy sometimes needs to be,
Right.
you know,
And we appreciate that you.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
Understand that
you know,
because.
minute.
if you say that you're looking at John Doe's land and it's the only suitable land.
Guess what
and then
happens?
John Doe
Yeah.
hears about that, guess what the price will
Yeah,
do?
that's
right.
exactly right.
Thank you for
Uh,
appreciating that. That's.
And that drives 90% of the whole thing, obviously.
That's the only thing.
Yeah, and I guess that also brings up a great point, Counselor, is where would we file or attach minutes from committees that are formed out of the VOCC? Would those minutes be attached to a subsequent meeting set of minutes, or would they be
Normally,
standalone?
they
If-
don't even have minutes.
If they're presented to the board, I mean, if the committee comes in and makes a presentation,
Then that would be in our minutes, correct?
that would be in our minutes, but I don't see that we need to have their minutes, the
It'd
committee.
be like the Fair Board minutes, or
Right.
we don't request those.
There was a discussion not too long ago about putting all the board's minutes on the website on one page, links to all of them, so that if somebody was interested in what the Fair Board is doing or whatever, they could go see the minutes. That would be awesome, and I think there was like an agreement that that was going to
I
happen.
think it was a general consensus. Can you make a note of that? We'll follow up with IT, Brenda, because
That's not hard
we
to
did talk to IT about that,
Did you?
right? I think Vernon
Yeah.
said, oh yeah.
He said he was
I
gonna
think he
do
was in there that day.
He was.
Thank you for bringing that up. Anyone, we're not going to vote on this, I don't, well, yeah, we are, we have a motion on the floor, sorry. Any other public comment before we vote on
Having an executive
scheduling
session.
executive session, which obviously your comments would be limited to executive session, so probably be a little weird, but hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor of scheduling executive session on April the 30th at 2 p.m., say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Do you have any idea who is going to be present for that, or are we just going to wait
I
and see?
do not. I will find that out. Yep. We'll speak to that committee and find out what representation. Okay. All right, thank you. Fire ban is the next item on the agenda, a discussion about renewing said fire ban that is in place and is set to expire on April the 20th. I would, with your permission, gentlemen, defer to Shannon.
Speak
Sheriff
first.
Byers.
All right, good morning, everyone. Fire restrictions. So I'm going to make a recommendation that we extend the fire restrictions another 30 days. I don't know if anybody's been keeping up with what's going around the state. Just yesterday, there were, I don't know the number of fires that were started. It was somewhere around 17 fires started yesterday. We've got the fire just north of Pueblo, the 117, mile marker 117 fire. El Paso County is over 40,000 acres now. We've got the fire in Baca County over 70,000 acres. Just those two fires alone, 110,000 acres. Conditions are extreme, yes. So, we're going to get set up again, just like we did last time with fire restrictions in place. There is a prediction of some moisture Friday, Saturday, but at this point, the models don't show that it's going to be significant enough that I could say, we might want to take a look at it. But having said that, we are supposed to get some moisture Friday, Saturday. That you should maybe at least consider before you vote, because we'll get some phone calls again. But I'm not seeing any serious accumulation in there. But it might.
Yes, go ahead, sorry.
I move that we extend the fire ban for an additional 30 days based upon the fire marshal's sheriff recommendation.
Starting on...
I'll second.
Continuing at the extent, when the last one ends, we'll continue it for an additional 30 days.
Is there a second?
I did that already.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to extend the fire ban for another period of 30 days. Discussion.
Fire Chief Shy is on board with. He recommends the same thing, as does I know Cindy Howard isn't really one of those that you would take, but she concurs as well, as she's been talking with OEMs across the state. And I know the folks in El Paso County, they're requesting any assets that I don't know if our fire folks are considering sending anybody up there, but right now they're asking for anybody that can help. They've lost, I think we've lost, yesterday they lost 27 structures between all the different fires. 5 homes in the 117 fire. And then another 3 or 4 at Baxter on the Baxter fire, and then they've lost 10 or 15 in the Baca County so far. So it's
Okay.
So I got a couple
bad.
questions.
I mean, we all know, everybody yesterday, holy cow, the wind was terrible.
Yeah, terrible. Just a couple quick ones. How many people have permits that are waiting to burn stuff? Do you keep track of it? 180 of them?
184.
All around the county?
So just so everybody knows, when you apply for a burn permit, it's good for a year. So if you went in today and said, hey, I want to put in a burn permit so that if the fire restrictions were to be lifted, then it's good for a year. The requirement is that when it comes time you want to burn, you call into the sheriff's office. Say, this is Joe Smith, and I live at this address, and we pull up your burn permit. It says, I'm planning on burning today. I've got 6 burn piles. It's comprised of, and we ask some specific questions, and then you're good to go if we're not in fire restrictions. That's how that works. So right now, Bill, there's 184 that are active.
And like last time, you mentioned it already, if there's all of a sudden the skies open up and we get floods, everybody wants to catch it before so they can burn it, so they're not going to get caught with a bunch of burn piles that are going to catch their house on fire, theoretically. So when we get calls, we'll tell them, there's not enough happen. We know that. But what if there is? How do you handle that? Are we going to call them? You want us to call a meeting with a commissioner, special meeting, or what?
So then a special meeting would have to be called by the commissioners, because you as an entity are the only ones currently with our fire ordinance in place. You're the only ones that can rescind that restriction.
And so that's probably the best approach right now with this.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Now,
maybe in the future we can look at
for everyone
options.
to know, we had a workshop earlier this week, and we're going to have a follow-up one. We're in the process. We're going to rewrite and modify make some changes
Procedures.
to the ordinance. It's 1502, the open fire, open burning ordinance. And so we're going to make some modifications, and there is some talk right now about trying to make the ordinance a little more fluid. The challenge you have is when you put restrictions in place, right, it takes a certain amount of time to get the word out to everyone that they're in place, and then when you rescind them, it takes a little while to get the word out. And so if we're moving like this, and then we're trying to get the word out, what ends up happening is, right, somebody starts a fire and legitimately doesn't know that we're in restrictions.
Yeah.
And, you know, maybe we go out there and it's not a big deal, but when they start, if they were to start a fire and we're under restrictions and it blows up and it becomes a 40,000 acre fire and it burns down 5 or 6 homes. So we want to make that ordinance fair to everyone in the fact that it's effective. We want people to be able to know, and so it's a challenge. It's not. This is one of the most difficult things to deal with, at least from my end, because people are there. I mean, we want them to mitigate. Well, when you mitigate, what do you create? You create a bunch of slash and fuel. Well, then they want to burn it. But the weather and the good Lord are saying, you know, we're going to give you dry conditions and you shouldn't start a fire. And so we're in this. It's tough. It's tough. I tell everyone I have 30 slash piles on my property that I want to burn too. I would love to have 3 feet of snow and be able to light them babies off, but just can't right now.
Yeah, I certainly, as probably everybody else did, watched the news with some serious interest last night, and actually found myself shaking my head when I read that El Paso County was going into an immediate stage 2 fire ban. How many fires did they have in that county? 4 or 5.
At least.
Whether they did or didn't probably would not prevent somebody from flicking a cigarette butt out along the interstate, which you assume either that or a train, one of the two probably started the 117 fire, because it started right at the interstate. So stage 2 wouldn't necessarily prevent that, but they had a fire in Pueblo in a backyard that started from somebody's barbecue grill. Well, stage 2 fire ban in Pueblo County would have probably prevented that. It didn't really go anywhere. They managed to get it put out. But I just felt like we made the right decision regardless of how our email blew up, because we got 6 inches of snow after that. I would guess the same thing's going to happen again. And I'll gladly take that heat, because I sleep pretty well at night believing that we did our due diligence of putting our county or keeping our county under a fire restriction.
Well, it was so bad yesterday at the Baxter fire. So Pueblo County lost sheriff's office vehicle burned up in the fire, and Pueblo Fire lost a fire truck burnt up in the fire. The winds were so bad they got in front of it and then they couldn't get out. And I don't know how they didn't get somebody killed. Thank God they did it. But they had
firefighter or fire personnel to the hospital.
Yeah,
so
two deputies.
Yeah.
Two deputies.
So
One
you're
of them's
probably
still in the
talking,
hospital.
$250,000 in those 2 pieces of assets
more
that
than
went
that.
down. More than that.
More
Fire
than that.
trucks, half
The
of
fire
them.
truck's probably half.
Yeah.
380, 400,000. So
And I'll say this, gentlemen, I'll gladly take the phone calls and the emails.
it's not popular, and I can tell you that's probably why El Paso wasn't in a fire restriction, because it's not popular.
It's not popular.
It's April, and in Colorado, we aren't supposed to be in fire restrictions in April. We're supposed to be getting moisture, and it's supposed to, April, right? That's when the big snowstorms come, traditionally. And so it's not popular, and I'll say it now, like I've said all the time, so many times politicians are really worried about keeping their job instead of doing their job. I'll take the heat.
Yeah, that's what I think. Yeah, thank you, sir, appreciate it.
And, it being April and it being such a wonderful April, I think the people who come as tourists are coming quicker. And they may not be listening to KLZR where you hear, hey, fireman, and so with the stage 2, am I allowed to have my gas bill going outside?
Yes.
See, open flame just is kind of seeming stupid.
And I think
Sorry to use that word, but any flame outside is truly a bad idea.
It is.
And we've got campers coming up, and they're going to feel really good about that little propane thing with the little one burner, knowing we're safe, and that darn thing's gonna tip. And standing fuel extraordinaire. So
Well, the challenge we have,
I hate to be the jerk.
so that, one of the challenge though is, so how much forest land do we have in our county? 30% roughly, right? Smith Creek, perfect example. Smith Creek. Deputy contacted a person on Sunday in Smith Creek. Had a campfire going.
Wood.
They
Oh, yeah.
bought the wood down here at the corner.
But it's not illegal.
I know.
Because the
but
Forest
it's
Service
just-
isn't into fire restriction, and we can't enforce fire law on forest lands. Although my deputy wrote them a ticket anyways, when she shouldn't have. But at least and you know what? It's one of those things, but at least the fire was out before something crazy happened. But the Forest Service, our regional Forest Service folks have acknowledged that they are not burning anything, and they meet all the conditions to go into fire restrictions, but they don't get to make that call. That call is made at a much higher level, and those folks at that higher level are not willing to put the Forest Service lands into a fire ban yet. And now, I'm telling you, our local forest folks, they're good folks, and they recognize and they acknowledge the critical conditions we're in. But again, they have bosses too, and they don't get, all they can do is make recommendations. They don't get, and so they're not doing any, they had a bunch of slash burns scheduled. They're not doing any of that. So we're putting pressure on people that we contact in the forest not to have fires. But ultimately, I'm telling you, if you live in Smith Creek or any of that, we can't make those people on the forest lands put their fires out if they stand up and stomp their feet.
Commissioner Prince?
I was just going to commend your officer for taking some proactive action, even though
Yeah.
they're outside their jurisdiction, probably an illegal action, but they were trying to protect the citizens of this area. I compliment your officer.
Well, we've contacted the person who's written the ticket and said, listen, tear it up and throw it away. We're going to pull that ticket from you, but we're going to go out in the forest. We're going to talk to them, say, listen, look around.
Well, it gave them a good
Right,
awareness.
and that's the
that
point.
it's
We
fine.
didn't have a fire down there, so I can live with it. I can live with it.
I wanted to just make a comment that you mentioned, and that was, I think if I understand the statutes right, if it is an appliance that can have the fuel shut off, then it's typically legal in a stage 2 fire ban. If you can't, then it's not. There's two problems with that. One, you're exactly right. It's
too
very
late.
easy.
It's too late.
Yeah. And then the second thing is, we could take care of that problem. That would be a stage 3 fire ban, and that's ugly. That is very ugly for this county. I mean, you can't go anywhere. You can't drive off-road. There's a lot of things. So that leap between a stage 2 to stage 3, in my opinion, is a lot bigger leap than from a stage 1 to a stage 2. Stage 2 is still pretty friendly.
Yes.
Well, we are talking though about modifying that stage 2, and there could be some discussion about including those into the stage 2. So, I mean, we are looking at that.
Good, because right now all I'm seeing is more and more tinder every day.
Yeah, every
My
day.
backyard's drier and drier and drier.
You're right.
Okay, other comments before we vote?
Procedural issue.
Yes, sir?
To extend the fire ban, which was imposed by resolution, we need another resolution. So there's a motion to extend it, but the motion really should be to have approve another resolution to extend it. I can get that to Brenda today for your signatures if you approve that today.
Would you care to restate your motion, sir?
Be happy to.
Thank you.
I move that we initiate a new resolution to extend the fire ban as the current one terminates for an additional 30 days.
Thank you. And
I'll second it again.
been moved and seconded to restate the motion to indicate that we enter into a new resolution extending the fire ban for 30 days starting April 20th.
You got a question out there?
Yes, sir.
I would like to say that I would vote for all the people at Wetmore to keep that fire ban on. We've had 2 big fires down here. We were pushed out of our house. I sure hate seeing another one.
Yeah. Yeah, and like Sheriff Byerly said, in my mind, there's only one reason we would not do that. It's because we were afraid of the political fallout, and that's a bunch of bull. We took some heat last time. We'll probably take some heat this time, but crying out loud, what's 20 phone calls and emails compared to the safety of all the residents and their property? So your point is well taken, sir. Thank you. Yeah. Hearing no further discussion, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor of entering into or writing a new resolution to extend the fire ban for another 30 days starting April 20th, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Sheriff Byerly, and thank you, Counselor, for doing that. We have another meeting this afternoon. I'm wondering about signatures on that resolution. Do we have to adopt it once it's written?
No, you've already adopted
Okay.
it, it's just get
So
it.
we can just get it signed and get it filed?
Right.
So as of probably this afternoon, that,
Yeah, I wasn't planning on coming to the
Oh,
landfill
okay.
meeting.
Oh, that's true.
I'll get it
That's
to
right.
Brenda.
Okay.
And she'll have it available for you
Okay.
all to sign.
all right, thank you. Our next item of business, cleanup day for the towns of West Cliff and Silver Cliff. Commissioner Prince, would you take the lead on that, sir?
I'd be happy to, thank you. This is an annual event that both the towns have, and they allow people to put trash out that have been collected for quite a while. And both the towns go along and collect the trash that's put out. Traditionally, the commissioners have abated any fees, I don't want to say any fees, the normal fees to the landfill for normal rubbish. The people who have specific items, for example, batteries, electronics, mattresses, tires,
White goods,
Right.
washing machine.
right. Those fees are not abated, and they do pay the landfill to have those picked up, if they even go to landfill. For example, the paint is taken by Ace Hardware and it's recycled, so it never hits our landfill. Electronics are taken down to Pueblo to be dismantled and taken care of, so those don't hit the landfill. But other items do. Mattresses, for example, will, and they take up a huge amount of space in the landfill. So to continue the tradition, I would like to move that for May 12th, during the cleanup day for both West Cliff and Silver Cliff, that the county abate the landfill fees for traditional trash and not the exemplary trash.
So normal fees.
Normal fees.
I'll second that motion. It's been moved and seconded that the county waive the normal landfill fees on March 12th for the town cleanup day for the towns of Silver Cliff and West Cliff. Further discussion?
You said March 12th.
Yeah, it's May
You
12th.
said March 12th.
I did say March 12th.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. May
May
12th.
12th.
It's only for the people, or it's only for, how are you gonna know?
It's kind of an honor system. There's nothing to keep me from hauling my stuff into the town of West Cliff, but it's an honor system for the residents of those two municipalities.
Has the county ever considered participating in that as well and allowing some folks that live in the county to facilitate something like that as well?
Didn't we
They
talk
talked about that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's ever been done, at least I'm not aware of it. I can imagine if that was a countywide deal, we'd probably overflow that landfill, but
I don't know, the only reason I ask that is because, like right now, we're in the middle of a neighbor dispute because, we don't have any ordinances on trash in the county, and so this one neighbor doesn't take his trash to the county, he piles it up on the fence line. And so then the other neighbor's got all that trash blowing in his property, and he's mad as sin about it, and so
So the reason he's not doing it is because he can't afford it, or what? Doesn't want
I
to do
think
it?
he just doesn't want to do it.
they won't do it. They don't want
Is
to
having
spend
a
the
free
money.
day
Because there's
gonna
no
make him
rule
do
that says
it?
he can't just dump all his trash on his property.
I'll I'll get to you, sir. If you were going to have a comment, I just wanted to quickly say that to address what you just specifically said, we have a committee, we called it the hazard team, hazardous assessment team, and maybe that's something that committee could look at and make a recommendation to the county and say, you know what, we recommend you pass a trash ordinance. I don't know.
Yeah.
But believe me, I was on a site last week as a commissioner, and it was not pretty. It was absolutely unbelievable how some people choose to live when it comes to trash. And certainly, had we had an ordinance, a county ordinance, that would not probably have occurred.
Well, I mean, it takes up resources, so now, I mean, I'm having to facilitate these neighbors. I have to take a deputy out there, or send a deputy out there so that the neighbors can discuss
Sort it
this
out.
without one of them getting killed or beaten to tar.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to comment for the record that I was involved with this with the town of West Cliff, so I'm wearing two hats at once, but since it's not a controversial issue, I felt that it's okay for me to handle this.
Commissioner Canada?
You did a fantastic job with that town issue too.
Yeah. Well, we'd have to discuss that in something else, but your whole point was you want to open it up for everybody?
I'm just asking, I was just,
I mean,
I wasn't
what's your thought?
necessarily, I just,
It's-
is there, and it's.
I don't mind. I
it's
think
little
a
late
cleanup
this
day
year
for the
probably,
county's
but-
not a bad idea. Why
Yeah,
not?
just having a day, I mean, the two towns are doing it, obviously, why are they doing that? To reduce the trash that folks have laying around. Maybe we could do something county-wide and make it a spring clean day for the entire county.
It's just
I'm just throwing that out as a
I think
thought.
it's
You can schedule different days for
Their
people.
resemblance.
Could.
yeah.
That's something we could actually.
Not a bad idea,
maybe
just for
discuss with
morale
Rusty
and,
tomorrow.
spring cleaning. It's a fun thing to do. Let's get everybody energized and,
You know,
well,
I think
I hate cleaning anything, but
Of course, you might talk to the landfill manager
That's just
first.
what I
Well,
was
that's,
saying.
yeah, I'm not proposing
No.
to make a decision
Right.
today.
I just,
I don't think that's a bad thing.
I
don't think
think
it's a hard thing.
historically, they've got a pretty good idea of the amount of trash they're going to collect on May 12th from the two towns.
Right.
My concern would be if we open that up countywide, good Lord knows what would be drug pushed, pulled, and flown into that landfill. So certainly, I think we'd have to have a discussion with the
See what,
manager of the
what he thinks.
landfill.
I'll ask him.
We're having a meeting
We can
this
talk
afternoon, so.
later. Yeah.
Well, and it might be something that if you do consider a trash ordinance and make people clean up the trash that they have now, and then you start after that
Right.
where you're starting with a cleaner slate than years and years of
Yeah.
accumulation.
You'll never get through the planning and
Yeah.
zoning committee.
No.
All right, thank you. Further discussion? Hearing none. Let's see, we had a second, correct?
Yep.
Make sure we're good.
You say.
It's been moved and seconded that we waive the landfill fees for May 12th. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We will waive the normal fees. Obviously, Rusty will make sure that those other fees are in
And we can
place.
talk to him later.
Yep. Next item of business was discussion pertaining to hiring a weed manager for Custer County. I guess I would like to wrap both of the last two items under new business, the appointment of the Weed Advisory Board and hiring a weed manager for the county together, because one's really now kind of a moot point. By law, we have to have a weed manager and a weed management plan for our county. Can be done several different ways. The weed board is functioning, and we are at the point now where we need letters of intent from those members. I've sent them an email requesting that.
How many do you have?
I'd have to count. I think there's 10 altogether.
Is there a minimum?
No. There are membership requirements. There's two of them, really. One, that members on that weed board have to live in the county, and that the majority, one over half of those members, have to live on 40 acres or more. So we have vetted those members. We are in compliance with those two requirements of that state statute. And so I'm assuming by our next meeting, I will have those letters of intent, and then we can vote whether or not to approve that board.
So this will go into unfinished business?
And therein lies a great question. Technically, no, it would not.
Would it go into old business?
No, it would not, technically.
Well, it's on the agenda for today, and we're going to move it to another time.
And that's why everybody believes that old business is correct, and technically, I keep saying technically because it is not.
It's continuing
Robert's Rules of Order. There's just been years of misconceptions about what unfinished business is and what unfinished
whatever you
business
like.
isn't. So it's not what I like. I don't have anything to do with it.
Like reading the Robert's Rules?
Not every night.
You taught it for years.
I think it's fascinating, but geez.
As I alluded to earlier, technically, if we were in the middle of a discussion on a motion and we were interrupted for whatever reason and our meeting ended, then that would be rolled over to unfinished business. Other than that, nothing would go under unfinished business. Technically, we can choose to
How do you pick up a table motion?
operate. It actually comes under new business as there's a motion to take from the table an item of business.
An item of new business.
So technically, it would be under new business, and you would do that with the motion to take from the table. Same thing happens with postpone indefinitely and
Yeah.
and postpone definitely. It's like, well, when do we bring those up? Everybody wants to do it
Whenever
under
you
old
want.
business. Technically, that's not the case. So anyway, the weed manager, I just want to bring you up to speed on where we're at with that. We did not budget for a weed manager position. That was an oversight. Should have been because it's required by statute. So we are going to try to circumvent that this year by entering into an agreement with Werfenau County. Their weed manager and his supervisors, which are the county commissioners, have agreed to work with us for this year and cooperate using their weed manager / applicator. There's really two positions, a weed manager and then somebody to spray the weeds. We're thinking about combining those together, but certainly for this year, if we agree, if the commissioners agree to do that, we could enter into an agreement with Werfenau County and they would serve as a weed manager / applicator for this year. Roger Squire, who is on that weed board, has agreed to have a discussion about maybe him serving as the weed manager and using Werfenau guy as just the applicator. So it's still in flux. We still have some work to do on that, but that's kind of the route we're headed to. I don't know how we're going to fund that necessarily. We did the same thing with Fremont County in years past and hired their applicator to come up and spray. So I just don't know. We're just going to probably have to bite the bullet and try to find that money if and when we get to that point of spraying those weeds. Now, when I talk about weed spraying, I'm talking about on public rights of ways. I'm not talking about private land. Private land spraying is under the county's purview, but only subordinate to once the weed spraying is handled on the rights of way of our roads. That's first. We have to do that first. Then we can look at some private stuff. Yes, sir.
I thought the CSU manager.
That's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up. In the past, CSU Extension Director has functioned as our weed manager. That is no longer going to happen per direction of CSU. Yeah. When we hired our new Extension Director, we asked, can she serve as our weed manager? And they said no. Would like to have a further discussion with them about that because it's a great match, but they're wanting to pull back from that in all their extension positions, although I was told yesterday that there is an extension person that is currently the weed manager in her job, which is less than a year old. So I don't know. I'm going to follow up with CSU area director for extension and make sure, but I read the communication between him and our extension director, and he was very adamant about, no, you are welcome to serve on that committee as an ex officio member, but not to serve in leadership capacity, including a manager. So I don't know. Technically, if we were to meet the letter of the law, we would have an office and a weed manager and an applicator. They could be the same person, but that's really our responsibility. But we can get around that by doing a cooperative agreement.
So that's a full-time job, full-time employee?
The weed manager and applicator in Chaffee County believes that if we're going to do it right, it would be a full-time job, yes. But if we're also at the place where we can cooperate with another county and use it as a part-time thing, then it's hard to say that's a full-time job.
Yeah.
So it should be a full-time job. It would be, I think, if we could afford that. I believe the work's there. The weed board believes that should be a full-time job.
Well, that was my question. If it's a full-time position, then what would that typically cost the county a year?
I had that discussion with our financial officer. At a minimal starting wage of $24,000 a year would cost the county about $41,000. So we're looking at a $40,000 position.
Not the same as a police car.
Wow.
I just thought I mentioned
Yeah, thanks for driving that home.
I mentioned it.
Let's see, weeds or a
Awkward
car?
silence. So I don't know. I think probably this year for sure that's the route we're going to go. Is we'll probably have to look at doing a cooperative thing with Werfenau County, and he's very excited about doing it. He wants to come up and do it. So.
Doesn't have enough weeds down there?
Well, it's a convoluted
Pretty
story.
weedy down there.
Fire.
He has some other responsibilities. He would like to get out of those and
Oh.
become a full-time weed person.
I see.
And the county commissioners kind of agree with him that that's probably the best route. So I think our next real step here is, number one, to get the weed board appointed.
Right, gotta do that.
And then I think we need to have formalized some talks between the county commissioners and Werfenau County, whether they're comfortable with sending their guy up here to talk to us, or
Whether
how
we're
that's all
comfortable,
going
there's
to
going to
happen.
be enough time for him to do the good job that we need, right?
Yeah, correct.
kind of
We'll
time
just
he's
have
got,
to. I mean,
really.
it's hard to say. That's the other thing. It's hard to say. We're going to need 300 hours. We don't know. If we get a ton of rain, then those number of hours would go up, obviously, for weed spraying. But if we stumble around and do not maintain some approach at trying to mitigate our weed situation for a year or two, then we're really in trouble, because we'll have infestations all over the county.
Well, then there's a lot of private people that want to have the expertise. They don't understand what they need to do. Somebody needs to talk with them.
Right, and as a
This
weed
takes time.
manager, that could happen. Now, applicator, again, that would be subordinate to when we
Right.
get our county work done, then that person could hire out. There's other people that can hire out privately to take care of the private needs. We do have a lady that's, I don't want to say on the board because they haven't been officially appointed yet, but has indicated an interest to serve on it and been accepted by the board, and she does have her certified private applicator's license. So there are people in the county, and of course Jeremiah Hansen comes in the county in the summertime, and he's a private applicator as well. So and there's a guy in Fremont that does it as well. So there are some other options there, but that's for private stuff. That's down the road after we meet our obligations as a county to do what we need to do by statute. So I just wanted to bring you up to speed on that. We'll have to just get with Werfenau County and see what we're talking about money-wise and all that. So I'll come back to the commission with that unless they come up and meet with all of us. That fair? Sound reasonable enough? Okay. Further items of new business to come before the board?
So you're not going to appoint that board today?
No, we do not have letters of intent from that board. No, maybe I didn't make that clear, I'm sorry. by board policy, any committees or boards functioning under our umbrella need to submit a letter of intent that they wish to serve on a board, and when we get those gathered up, then we will appoint that board. If that's what the Board of County Commissioners choose to do, they don't have to do it, but we can certainly vote on that. So, good question, thank you. Public comment? Yes, sir.
I guess I'm here today to maybe get on the agenda for next month. I'm trying to petition Wetmore Hardscrabble Genealogical and Historical Society. Presently meets over behind the post office, which is my facility. I'm sort of carrying all the financial burden. I would like to try to transition those guys over here because this is the community building in the first place. They have a lot of genealogical and historical information, which I personally believe would reside better and be more accessible if it was closer to the library. That's just a common sense thing for me. There are, there's some stuff over there that I think they're probably 50 members strong. They meet once a month. I can come in next month if you would accept me with some harder numbers for you and exactly what physically they're in possession of and what data they're in possession of and how many people there are. So I would like to, yes.
For the record, would you state your name, please?
Ken Culpin, last name C-U-L-P as in Pumpernickel, I-M.
Thank you.
It always gets a laugh, that's why.
The pink pumpernickel.
Thank you. I just wanted to get you on record so our secretary has that record. And I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's
just to do that.
That's the nuts and bolts.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry. You and I had talked about that at one point. You shared your concerns with me. I think it would be appropriate maybe to have just a little open discussion, not to take a lot of time here, but we've got people that are involved with this facility, and you're thinking that you'd like to bring those historical records.
The records, any of, I know there's a piano over there, an organ, there's a stuffed bobcat, there's military jackets, there's a couple of computers which have the data. And they're just a couple of maps, knickknacks, but I would like to try to transition them out of my physical, real property.
Got it.
Get them over here so that I'm not. Well, I want to do stuff with the place too.
I just asked generally. Let's talk about the records first,
Okay.
and then the real property maybe
Well,
separately, because it might be two different issues. I don't know.
Well, and I believe that Kathy West and Peggy Martin and Margaret, I've forgotten her last name. That's why Storm. Thank you, ma'am. They really know more of actually what they are in possession of. They were supposed to try to get this ball rolling before the end of the year last year. I tried to tell them, hey, let's migrate. Trying to get, and now that would happen probably in August of last year. Now we're into April of this year, and I see no advancement.
Okay.
So I'm.
Okay. Yeah. Good. Go ahead, sir.
Just a question, the organization, is that a county organization or private organization? Do we know?
I believe it's a private organization, and I think it costs like maybe $20 a year or $10 a year to join this group of people.
Okay.
But I see absolutely no compensation, none, and I'm a good guy and everything, but come on. And there's two parts to it. I have personal reasons for wanting it to go away from me, and I also believe that it being what it is, the entity that it is, it would be more at home in this facility where this facility offers more, just across the board.
Let's just have a little discussion. What do you guys think? Room's probably going to be a concern.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
We've
We
got a
don't
bunch
have
of
room for
stuff,
this
there's
stuff.
no room for it over here.
We don't have room for
They
it.
could
And
be
that's
here.
a historical society. We do not
You don't function as
function
that.
that.
Right. I don't believe you intend, nor do I believe that it's something anybody would force onto the library. I think it's an offer, correct?
Yes, I know that's what I'm saying. I'm just saying, well, as far as the data that's there, I think that it only makes sense that the data be there.
Right.
And as far as everything else, that's really all the physical, like the Bobcat, somebody owns it, right? So I can say, hey, come on guys, gotta
Yeah.
get it back in the house.
Have you spoken to them about it?
Like I'm saying, I started this back last August, and I'm like, and they said, well, how long do we have? And I said, we easily have till the new year, but I'd like to see something start rolling.
Are they in
And
favor of
so
this?
something started rolling here.
Were they opposed to it, or they?
No, they were like, okay, we understand, we need to get somewhere else.
But,
Right,
Where?
and, I mean, if push comes shoving, I can, right now, the post office is a really cute facility. I'd like to show you all after your executive session, if you have the time to go over and just see how this is a wonderful spot. It was built by Doc Walters, I believe, and he was the doctor, he was the post office, asylum, telephone ran out of there. It's just a really neat, and they raise kids and everything out of it. So the post office is in the front there, but I got this whole back, and I'm recognizing having to maintain the facility. I'm not getting any help. I'm getting no monetary gain, and it's starting to weigh me down. And so I want to be a nice guy and send them to someplace.
right.
But I mean,
As residents, is there any place else down here that would be appropriate for that? Obviously, they don't have another building, the Historical Society, or they'd be using it, I'm
Exactly.
assuming.
Not that we know.
Yeah.
They have requested space for 2 china cabinets or whatever they want to call them, glass space. And they were going to put some other choice items that related to Whitmore on display, and that has not happened. The cabinets are sitting, one in the north room and one in the hallway.
So you guys
They're
agreed to
still
that?
empty.
Yeah, you agreed to that, right?
To those
Yes,
two
we
camps.
For those
agreed
two
to,
cabinets, but
those
nothing's
two,
been done.
If they want to put their
Small stuff?
any items
Right.
on display, that's fine, but we are not responsible for any item that comes in.
These are items that,
And that was the final, said no more
Okay.
at that time, so they had to understand the no more at one point. That was word of mouth, that's all.
Okay,
we don't mind them meeting here.
right,
The meeting is not the problem.
right. It's the
It's,
stuff.
Display of all our
Display of
items.
stuff.
The things that comes with them.
Right.
They've got a lot of it.
Yeah, I guess part of me wants to say this is really not a county issue, other than the fact that I respect you coming and asking to be on the agenda, which we don't want to forget, that was your original request, and we will address that. It would be a county issue in the fact that this is county property, I understand that. So, I don't know.
Meeting place, I understand about the, and that is information I didn't even have. That
Wow.
there was stuff available for the actual physical. Thank you for giving that to them, and I'm sorry to hear they haven't moved anything. And like I said, with the records, I think that is important. I mean, and it should be general information. But just to know that they would have a meeting place like right here, that's
Which they know that, right? They know they're welcome to meet here.
They have never asked us for.
Oh, okay,
But
okay.
we
They
would
haven't
hope
been
to let
meeting
them
here.
use it.
Gotcha.
So it seems like maybe they ought to get on the agenda with the Wetmore board rather than on the agenda
That's
with you guys.
what I'm thinking, and unless Ken takes away from this is, yeah, probably not gonna happen, I don't know that, but yeah, that's why I said I'm not sure it's a county thing more than a library board thing and a genealogical thing, I don't know.
It would be a county thing as far as, yeah, they're allowed to come meet in this room once a month instead of over there once a month. That would,
And you're okay with that?
which we're not talking about the library.
That's our boards.
Now, when I say the I'm sorry, I kept saying library, I meant the Wetmore Community Center, I apologize. Not talking about the library, we're talking about the community center.
The community board community building board would have to say so on that, not.
Then I need to get on that agenda.
Right. That's what I'm thinking.
Building
What do you
board.
think? You probably,
Yeah, no, I think the community board is where this question needs to lie.
Right.
But the question I have, and I don't mean this mercenary in any way, but as the private owner of this facility,
Uh-huh.
I suspect you have the right to say, on this day, you
Go
may
away.
no longer be.
Yeah,
I
that's-
know you don't want to do
Right, because that's
that.
gonna make me friends with everybody.
No, that's not why I'm saying it. What I'm saying, if you did something, get on the board, talk to them, and let's work this out, because the history of this community is so important to be kept. And it makes sense, to me, it makes sense, and I'm not on the board, it just makes sense to have in the community building somewhere, I don't know, and maybe you're opposed to that, and I'm going to respect whatever the board says.
Absolutely.
It just makes sense that the county building ought to have the county records.
Well, we just want to address that this is not a museum.
Agreed.
That's what they've got, a
yeah,
museum.
okay, absolutely. And that was gonna be my other thought, maybe talk to West Cliff Museum and see if they have a desire. I agree, it needs to be down here, but if nobody down here wants it, it would be better than putting it to the flame.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
So I'm sensing that these folks feel like they don't have room for it. That's not official, but that's the general feeling I'm getting.
Well, I have to say it.
So then you got to start looking at other options versus putting it to the torch. That's all I'm suggesting.
Well, and that means you guys, being Wetmore, you ought to have that discussion with the people of Wetmore. Do they want the history? And if so, what are some buildings? What are some options? That's where it ought to start with the board.
Okay, so, community building board,
Come talk to us.
and of course, the historical society.
Right. I
That's
would
where we need to
get,
work
I would
on
get
bringing
those
it
two
together.
people together. Those two
Well,
people.
thank you for your direction.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Other public comment? Yes, sir.
One thing, so I would like to just have a discussion or get your thoughts. So as we're in April here now, having attended just a talk earlier this week with some forest, with the FMO, Dennis Page, then with the NRCS yesterday, which is the Natural Conservation Resource. I don't know what that stands for, but it's a bunch of folks across our region here that talk about search and rescue and trail management and just all the resources. But fires, fire is a big topic, and yesterday we got a big dose of that. If we ought to consider having a couple public education talks, have one here, have one up the hill in West Cliff or Silver Cliff, where we get together and we talk about some realities. It won't be a feel-good talk, at least from my perspective. It shouldn't be. I've been told twice in the last, a little over a week now, at some of these workshops that these gatherings typically don't have sheriffs talk about some of the situations like I've been making comments and talking, because I'm pretty blunt and to the point about some realities about if you haven't mitigated your properties, don't expect fires to be put out on your property, because we're not going to put people at risk of their lives over your house. But I think we need to have some education pieces, make sure in that we can talk about several things, code reds, we can talk about the unique challenges we're going to have this year, because we haven't had an ability to really burn as much slash as we've wanted to. And so I thought I would throw that out if that's something that maybe, because I can assure you I can try to put that together, but I might not get as much enthusiasm perhaps as if maybe you, at least I had you on board to try to do something.
If I could jump in, Sheriff, this may dovetail with the suggestion I made about a community meeting with the towers. We could have a community meeting that would talk about both issues. One meeting to talk about fire mitigation, the realities of fire if they happen, broadband, and just have a community meeting where the experts can speak to people who come.
Because I think I could get Dennis Page, the FMO, who is the fire management officer for the San Isabel district, which is we fall in. I'm sure I could get Dennis to come out and talk a little bit. Because what I really want it to be is I don't want to be lecturing people about what you need to do to mitigate. What I want to be talking about right now is, look, we're heading into what could potentially be the worst fire. Right now, we're in the conditions to have the absolute worst fire season we've ever had on record in Colorado. So the chances of us having a fire in our county are high, and we want you to be ready and to know what to expect. And let's just do some education, because we have some new folks in the county since the last time we've had a big fire.
Right.
Well, even though it was just a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
But just to get ahead of the ball on this, so that God forbid we don't have somebody that gets caught unaware and gets themselves in trouble.
Yeah, I know Cindy Howard would be on board with
Yeah.
that as well. I mean,
I
what a
think-
great place to promote that Ready, Set, Go program.
Right.
Maybe make it either a morning or an afternoon, 3 or 4 hours, an hour for tower, an hour for,
Well, honestly, though,
whatever.
I don't know that.
Tom, I'm thinking an evening.
Yeah,
So
I-
the people that can get out of work.
Yeah, you ought to, and it
5:30 or
probably
something.
ought to be separated.
Do one here and one up at the
Yeah, and
library.
that's was my initial thought, was if we overload that
Yeah, that-
agenda, if it's a
People
short
are-
2
Yeah.
or 6 to 8 or whatever, I'm not sure we could get it all in.
I don't think so.
Well, I think we make it
But I
an
agree
hour.
that
hour
the
and a half.
fire thing
Do the fire
should be
focus
first
on
and
it.
foremost, not to degrade.
But we
the
can
idea
put
about
out
the
information about towers, but you're right,
Yeah.
it can't drag on. It
Yeah.
has to be
Separate.
5:30 to 7.
I wonder if the school up there, obviously probably here for this meeting, the school or the courtroom, I would hope the courtroom wouldn't be big enough, is my initial
Or
thinking,
we could do it at the firehouse.
or at the firehouse,
I mean, I'm not volunteering at the firehouse, I don't
Right.
have that, but
yeah.
we can figure those logistics. I'm not talking we have to do that today. My general question is, do you
I would
believe
support
that's a good idea?
I think it's an
Yeah.
excellent idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll certainly work with you or Cindy or anybody else.
I'll send
Kit,
some,
to try to make
I'll
that
try to
happen.
get that ball rolling, and we'll get some dates. And Ken brought up a great idea. It might be something that we do maybe on a Saturday morning. Or
Sunday
late
afternoon.
morning, and cook up some hot dogs and maybe lure some folks in that way or something.
Not over an open flame though, right?
No,
Absolutely
no.
not. No.
We cook them in here on the
We can do
stove.
that at your house, in the kitchen. Cook up the hot dogs.
Yeah, I'm not sure, maybe Sunday afternoon wouldn't be appealing. Cindy's frustration, Cindy Howard, is she has tried to do some things in the last year and it's gotten terrible response. But maybe we come around the corner and approach it from a little different direction. I've sat in these last 3, I'll call them 3 bigger meetings, 1 in Pueblo and 2 up here, and they've all said, you guys, you will have a fire in the Sangres this year,
And it will be bad.
and it will be ugly. There's no questions. Yes, sir.
If you ever get pushed out of your house because of a fire, believe me, you want to know what's going on.
Yeah, and I think they talked about Tanglewood yesterday. I'm sure
It
we've
is
probably all
Tanglewood.
driven to Tanglewood. That is probably a 2-mile road? And if there's a fire there and we're trying to get resources in there and trying to get people out, that is not happening. There'll be,
So it's
yeah,
gonna get,
that's ugly. I mean, that's the scariest to me is that one road. I mean, obviously, you come out of Alpine area and Alvarado Campground, that road's a little bigger. You could probably meet a fire truck and get by. But on that road to Tanglewood, I'm not sure that would be a safe deal.
You might get better attendance if you feed people.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
And really
Great idea.
advertise.
It wouldn't have to be.
Advertise the heck out of it.
Yep.
It's a good point. Thank you, Sheriff Byerly, for bringing that up. Let's pursue that.
kid activities.
Generally, thinking about the timing, I would say before the 1st of June.
Yeah.
Certainly,
I was trying to get it
In the
by
next
mid-May.
2 or 3 weeks. Yeah.
Mid-May, yeah.
Yeah.
Try to do
Schedule one down here.
Yes, one here and one over there. Yep.
So who's gonna do the lead deal here? Gotta advertise it, get it on the thing. You and Cindy?
That's the problem with coming up with ideas.
Between-
Cindy and I'll work together. I think Cindy's
that's the
one that
right thing
has
to do.
ultimately,
Brenda.
But she's gonna need help.
Myself, you, Cindy.
Yeah, we can put something together. I mean, it's not logistically, it's not that challenging.
Yeah.
especially the information part.
Okay.
We have it.
Yeah.
Well, let's start with, for lack of better words, let's start with the fire awareness agenda first.
Right.
Because I'm not sure we could do it all, including the tower thing, in an hour, hour and a half.
I think we have to present it bluntly. I have to
I
say,
do
look,
too.
fire is coming. Are you ready?
Right.
This is to
Right.
help educate
That's right.
you so when it comes,
Yeah.
you know what to do.
And when
I
you
mean,
guys-
we have to be blunt.
Right.
We cannot dance around this anymore.
Well, you're educating them on the conditions,
Somebody's
and
going to get
here's
killed
what
if
you got to
they
do.
aren't prepared.
Right.
And ways to evacuate horses. I mean,
Yeah.
there's
That's
a
right.
whole lot of
That's exactly
information
right.
people need.
Yeah. And there is a plan for all that, but if people don't know it, it doesn't do any good. It doesn't do any good for the inner circle to know it and nobody else.
Well, what people need to also understand too is so if you're depending on Code Red to save your life, then you might want to get your affairs in order.
Yeah.
And that sounds
Yeah.
terrible,
Yeah.
but Code Red is a system that we've learned. We did the all-county test, that the infrastructure for the phone company cannot handle an all-call Code Red alert. It can't handle it.
You know,
The old CenturyTel, which is now CenturyLink, that switch cannot handle that volume. And, we're only talking 4,000 some odd, or not even that number. We had basically a 45% rejection
no kidding on that
sending that
last
out.
Code
Only
Red.
55% of the alerts went beyond the switch. And Code Red has told us, your switch is
You know,
50
those,
years old, it doesn't handle that volume.
those fire people in those meetings, that one down there in Pueblo was pretty,
Well, we see it right now. We
Yeah.
have 100 and how many thousand acres on fire in this
Yeah.
county right now, in April.
and they say basically, if you don't want to come to these meetings and if you don't want to get a ready, set, go thing, at least let us know who you would like us to notify next of kin. So we can be of some assistance to you or who your dentist is. That's what they're saying in
That's
these
what they're
meetings.
saying now.
Every
If you
one
don't
of
want to
them.
evacuate, you need to be able to hand us your dental
Yeah,
records.
let's be able to
And
contact your
then
That'll wake
dentist.
you
You're
up.
not going to get
And
out.
stay in your house. I mean,
Yeah.
we're not going to
Yeah.
fight people about it because there's other people that are willing to be helped, and so we have to move to those folks. And that doesn't get you votes, but that's the reality of it.
Okay, we have a landfill meeting this afternoon at 2 o'clock at the landfill. Anything else to come before the board? Further comment? Ma'am, I wanted to ask you if you'd introduce yourself too, and I got sidetracked. I'm sorry, because you came in after we introduced everybody else.
Okay.
That's the only reason.
My name is Roxy Halpin. I live just right up the hill. We had a fire started in our backyard, and of course I work in Pueblo County, so I'm never here. Just so happened it worked out today, and I decided to come. But and my husband works in Westcliff, so at that fire he was able to follow the fire trucks down and get down to the house with all of our horses and animals. And I stayed in Pueblo in my office on a cot for 3 days.
Wow.
And since we had no cell phone coverage or phones at the house, he knew that was the only way he could get a message to me if I stayed in the office.
Well, thank you for
So
being here today.
I was interested in everything you had to say, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Well, thank you.
Good,
Thanks.
glad you're here.
Anything else? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.
Wow.
Let the record show.